And that's what Habakkuk, the book of Habakkuk, really is about, because the Lord has told Habakkuk, in light of all the wrong and evil that was happening in Jerusalem and Judea, that the result of that and the remedy for that was going to be total captivity by a foreign nation, which was Babylon. And Habakkuk, was kind of scratching his head over that. We talked about it, like, how can this be the remedy? And we went into a little bit of that last week as we looked at verse 4 and verse 5, and we talked about how the word faith and faithfulness, which is so central to Paul's message in the New Testament, this verse, chapter 2, verse 4, is used by Paul 3 times in the New Testament in his discussions about faith and not works. And we talked about the word faith there in that passage is also faithfulness. So there is an inner stability that then, based upon that inner stability, produces the actions that we take. So ever how you feel that you must vote, for instance, you vote based upon the faith that you have. It's not that our world hangs on whoever wins this election. Our world hangs on what the will of God is. And it's out of that place of peace that we then take our steps of action of what we do or what we don't do, so depending upon whatever the nature is. And the Lord in verse 4 also noted in verse 5, he said, I want to let you know that I understand what's going on. He says, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant, never at rest, because he's greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations, and takes captives all the people. This is in particular speaking of Babylon. And the Lord's letting Habakkuk know, I know what's going on. I understand. You're telling me, first chapter, Lord, why do you keep showing me all this stuff and you're not doing anything about it? And the Lord says, well, no, wait a minute, I am doing something about it. Look over there, you see that big cloud of dust? That's not the Lone Ranger coming in, that's the Babylonians that are coming in to take your city. And he lets him know that he understands what that nation is like. Yes, I'm using them as a rod of punishment, but I understand what they're like. They are arrogant, they are greedy, they are brutal, they are vicious. I know what that is. And he's helping Habakkuk get to a place of rising higher, being able to see beyond, and to really have a sense that even though destruction is coming, it's going to be all right because I know who's in control. And the Lord, in verse 6, and going really through the rest of this second chapter, begins to expand upon his initial response in verses 2 through 5. And this section is divided in 5 passages, and commentators call them passages of woe, or an announcement of doom. Whenever you see that word woe in the Old Testament, it generally is an announcement of doom, in which the Lord gives categories of evil that are not surprises to him. And these will be cycled back upon the perpetrators. And it's over these categories that God's faithful people will ultimately be victorious. So, these 5 passages, the first one is from verses 6 through 8. And in that section, he is saying, woe to the extortioners. From verses 9 through 11, it is the greedy and arrogant. The third category, verses 12 through 14, it is they who build on bloodshed. Then the next section, the categories from verses 15 through 17. And it talks about the drunk and the violent. And then the fifth section, verses 18 and 19. These are the makers of idols. These are the 5 categories that he goes through in this. And it's interesting to see that what the Lord warns initially to Babylon and to the wicked Jews as they are abusing their fellow countrymen, the same things that he's talking about here can be seen to be replicated all throughout history and will be replicated at the ultimate end of it all. So let's look at several messages. I'm not going to so much go through and break down all of these. The reading of them is pretty self-evident, but we will make comments and we'll look at several messages that the Lord gives to Habakkuk about these categories of evil. And when I say categories, they're broad brushstrokes. And there's a lot more sins than just these 5 things. But these are categories of evil where a lot of evil falls under that type of that category of evil. So, but as you look at this chapter, as you look at these things, these categories that the Lord talks about, one of the first messages that stands out about these is that individual evil is cycled back upon the evil. Look at verses 7 and 8. He's talking to the extortioner. And he says, will not your debtors or creditors, which depends on which translation you have, suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim. Because you have plundered many nations. The peoples who are left will plunder you. For you have shed man's blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. And you see it repeated again, verses 16 and 17. You will be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it is your turn. Drink and be exposed. The cup from the Lord's right hand is coming around to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed man's blood, you have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. And what the Lord is wanting Habakkuk to understand in saying this to the extortioner, whether this might be an individual or if it's a group, or if it's an empire, such as Babylon, that was coming. To any that fall under that category, and all of those that he's talking about with Babylon and many in Jerusalem, he's saying, listen, no one lasts forever. There is a conclusion, and there's a replacement by others that will come upon you. And you will experience what you have done to others. It's really a statement of the providence of God and how it rules within the world of humanity. Daniel mentions this several times in his book, that the kingdoms of this world, the dominions of this world, are under the hand of God. Even those who don't believe in him at all, he still rules and guides and directs through their leadership and their work, whether they want to or even know it or not. And this is one of the things he's saying in answer. This is why your faith is so key. Verse 4. The righteous will live by his faith because he knows that it's going to come back on the extortioner. And it's going to, you can take that same message and fold it down to all of these other groups.
Billy, I've been gone a while.
Yeah.
But, so the Lord's saying this to the Jews.
He's saying it to Habakkuk and to the faithful Jews that are suffering. Yeah.
Well, what you just read about what the killing, they were commanded to do that many times over. So I'm confused at why that would be a reprimand when they were commanded to do everything you just said in the past. So what's the difference?
The difference is they were commanded to do so by the Lord. And in this local case here, it was the faithful Jews that were being extorted by the wicked Jews. Babylon was going to be an extortioner upon.
Right.
Now, when the Jews came into Israel, when they came into Canaan, when they worked and conquered the land, they became the judgment of God upon those countries.
And they were commanded to do
And they
so.
were commanded to do so. Just as Babylon, God didn't say to Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar, listen, he didn't come to him in an angel of the Lord and said, listen, I want you to go to Jerusalem. But through his means, whether it was a vision, dream, or just working through his own arrogance, Nebuchadnezzar was a hugely arrogant king. The Lord commanded him to bring that judgment. So this is what the Lord is saying to Habakkuk, that just like Israel was the rod of judgment upon Canaan, now, and if you read the Judges and during times of the kings, the Lord used various kings, to punish Israel. And now he's saying, now Babylon is going to be the rod of judgment upon you, Israel.
But they're not being reprimanded for what they had done in the past.
No.
Okay, that's what I thought so.
Yeah,
All right.
No, this is looking at it from the standpoint of, yes, I'm using Babylon, but I want you to understand that for God's faithful people, there's going to come a time where Babylon will experience the very same thing that they're doing to the nations around. Isaiah chapter 14 talks about this, actually prophesies this, and it talks about Cyrus coming later on, which is a Mede, in the fall of Babylon. And the Lord sees all of this, and he is saying, okay, to the extortion, individual, group, or even an empire, our faith says, one of the things that gives us peace and stability in the middle of confusion in the world is that we know that no one lasts forever. It's only God and God's people that last forever. And that he will bring judgment back around upon those who hurt God's people. In particular, that cycle, it's always looking at, it's going to hurt those who hurt God's people. The Nazis killed 6 million Jews, but what they did cycled back around. Their country was totally devastated in World War II. They were the homeless. They lived for a period of years just like the Jews in the concentration camps because everything had been destroyed. So it was that cycle. And this is what he's wanting Habakkuk and wanting us to understand. We look at things that are happening now, and we see all these categories of evil all around us. We see it all around us. And it looks like it's just going to go on forever. Why should I even try to serve God? And the Lord's saying, look, I know how to bring it all back around. I've done it all through history. Trust me, only those who believe in me live forever. Only those who trust in me. Amen. I appreciate that. And
that was amen.
Yeah. That was amen. We'll take an offering on it in a minute. But this is what he's wanting him to see. That there's evil is cycled back upon the evil. At some point, they don't last forever. And it's easy to say, okay, this is pie in the sky, this is just, you want me to just be happy living in the middle of the mess. He's not saying that. We're not saying that. If you can improve your situation, get out of a situation, you do that. And it could be your getting out of that is one of the things that the Lord would use to cycle that evil back upon that perpetrator, whoever it might be. Another message that comes out of this is that there is a witness set in the world that will testify against these categories of evil. Verses 11 and 17, look at verse 11. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. And then verse 17, the violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals. Animals? There is set in this world. We have a saying, if walls could talk. And that might be more true than we realize. Because there is a witness in creation that will testify against the evil, the wicked. And the bottom line of that is, you can't hide. Paul talks about the very creation groaning, waiting for its redemption from evil and the curse. Romans chapter 8, verses 19 through 22. You can't hide your evil. One of the general messages for the extortioner, the greedy, the arrogant, they who shed blood, the drunk, the violent, the makers of idols, you can't hide it. And if need be, what was it the Lord said? People were praising him, and the Pharisees or one of the Jewish folks said, y'all rebuke them. He said, if these people hold their peace, the rocks will cry out. And we always like to spiritualize that, but there is set in creation. I don't know how. I couldn't explain how. But there is set in creation a witness so that evil cannot be hidden forever. It will be brought out. It will be judged. It will be dealt with by the Lord. And that's one of the things that he's wanting Habakkuk to realize out of all this. For all of these greedy, arrogant people, they who build on bloodshed, oftentimes conspiracy to do that, drunk, violent, makers of idols, you're not going to be hidden. God knows where you are. God knows how it is. And he's going to deal with it. Another interesting message that comes out of this is that the end is already settled. And all that is earthbound and devoted to this earth is only fuel for the fire. And the reason for this is that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. That's verse 14. And you look at verse 13. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Habakkuk, you want to know, why are the evil, why do they persist? Why are they still here? Why does God allow evil to exist? It is at least partly for people, individuals, groups, nations, empires, to exhaust themselves. Because that's one of the words he used, that people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves against the will of God to show their own choosing of hell over heaven. and their labor, all that they do, will be exposed to the fire of God's judgment. Now he's told Habakkuk, remember, I keep going back to this because he's told him, the key is faith. The key is faith, faithfulness. This is the key. Why is it the key? Because evil is cycled back upon itself, because evil can't be hidden, and because everything that is so devoted to just this earth, to just being, as the book of Revelation calls them, earth dwellers, is only fuel for the fire. And it's already settled. God is going to win. God is going to be the victor. I was in studying this morning, I was reminded of another passage, Psalms, in the book of Psalms, Psalm 2. And when I begin to read it, you will automatically recognize it. Why do the nations conspire or rage, and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. Today I've become your father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter and dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you be destroyed in your way, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Okay. The end is settled. And he's saying to Habakkuk, look at the bigger picture. Look at what's going on. It's already settled. I'm going to win. I am going to win over evil, whether it's evil in Israel or evil in Babylon or evil in the United States or Russia or name it. I'm going to win, he says. It's already settled. And I allow the nations to exercise their self-will, their free will, to make their own decision, to exhaust themselves against my will, and all that they build up and do, it's only fuel for the fire. But when I decide to burn it down, it gets burnt down. Why is faith important? It takes faith to see that. And then another message, that among all that transpires on earth, this is verse 20, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Nothing has, nor will, unseat him from the position of power and the keeping and victory of his people over all evil and hurt. Just like the 3 Hebrew boys said to Nebuchadnezzar when he told them in Daniel, said, you see this fire furnace? I'll burn you up. Sounds like what ISIS does. I'll burn you up. And who is that God that will be able to deliver you from me? What do you think about that? And they said, we ain't even going to take time to think about it. Said, our God is able. But if he doesn't, we still will not bow, and we will still win. They were saying the very thing that the Lord has given to him in verse 20. They were saying to Nebuchadnezzar, all that transpires on earth, nothing surprises the Lord. Nothing catches him off guard. He has seen it. He understands it. He has already worked his will through it so that when it's all the dust settles, he's still coming out on the other side, and we will come out with him. Will some perish in the coming out? Yeah. But we still win. Because even the greatest enemy of life, death itself, is not enough to stop our victory. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. You have read it, you've heard it preached all through your life. But here is another instance in where the power of that passage comes to light. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 51 through verse 58. Listen, I'll tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself in the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Oh, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, He gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Sounds like what He's saying to Habakkuk. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know, that's faith, you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Even death itself will not prevent the Lord being in His holy temple. So let even death itself be silent before Him, because we are going to win even over that. So, to the extortioner, to the greedy and the arrogant, they who build on bloodshed, the drunk and the vile, to the makers of idols, these are the messages that form the response out of faith that we give as believers, and that he wanted Habakkuk to see. Habakkuk positioned himself. Remember what he said? After all of his moaning and groaning in chapter 1, he said in chapter 2, verse 1, I will stand upon my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me. I will position myself to hear from him, and I will wait until I get that answer. That's all he could do. That's all we can do. We wait on the Lord in faith. We position ourselves to hear from His Word what He's got to say to us. And when he positioned himself and waited, it was worth it to him. The second chapter of Habakkuk is a ringing response to the bitter confusion Habakkuk and we feel as we look at the state of the world around us. It looks bad, but that's not the end of the story. That's not the end of the story. Questions, comments? What else stands out to you? What else have I confused you about? Possible. The question is, going back to what Matt often says, will you receive it? We're in a mess in our world. And that is that's the understatement of the year. We're in a mess in our country. Again, understatement of the year. We may be in a mess in our own individual lives in different ways. But here's your strength. Here is what will keep you stable. The righteous will live by faith.
Here,
Yes, sir.
question.
Please.
Don't grace and faith work together? Because, in my opinion, don't grace supply the faith received.
Mhm.
Faith and the word received.
Yeah. Yes, they work together. We are saved by grace through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, which Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. And this is, if you will, Old Testament grace that we're hearing in the book of Habakkuk. God is saying, listen, Habakkuk, I am on the throne, and I will give you the ability to believe. Now, stand on that. Stand on it. Don't be shook. Stand on what I have given you. Receive it. Receive it. Good point. Other points, questions? Makes sense?
Well, this is where I get kind of confused, because if this happens again, you can picture something happening to the United States, you know, in an area, you know, like, let's say if things were going bad, you would say it was in Washington, happened in Washington, right? And, you know, you could see Israel's going to be saved, but, you know, they're Jewish, we're a Christian, but like, if I went to Israel, I would stick out like a sore thumb, even though I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't really understand that. I have faith, but I don't understand it. Because, you know, in reality, you feel like you should move to Israel. You mean you'd be safer. Not really, but you would. You really would.
Yeah, you feel like you would, yeah.
I cannot get that straight in my head. It's just kind of confusing.
And I think because this comes, and I have wondered about this very thing, that in the end time, if I am correct, that we go through the tribulation period, there really isn't any definitive instructions of what a believer is to do during the tribulation. And I've often wondered, well, then is that an argument for the reason he did it because we ain't going to be here? But there will be believers made during the tribulation period, and there still ain't any instruction on where to go, what to do. And I believe that the reason there isn't is that it's the same thing, it will be the same thing then that exists now. It's faith in Him. And the knowledge that all of this isn't going to last forever. In the Great Tribulation period, it ain't going to last but 7 years. I mean, it's going to be a nasty 7 years for us as believers. But it ain't going to last but 7 years until Jesus comes back. So I think that, you know, what are we supposed to do? We do the same thing we're doing now. We trust Him. We work our jobs. If we have them, if not, then we'll, out of that faith, we then realize where we got to go or what we have to do out of that. And if out of our faith that ends up being, you know, tribulation period of concentration camp, then that's what it is. It's not to say we'll go there just being happy. No. But we'll go there knowing this don't last forever. But we will. Yeah.
Bill, that reminds me of going back to Psalms 91. That about all this destruction that you've seen and that's going on, it will not come near you as long as you believe and trust in that faith in God.
And I think I have wrestled with that passage of Scripture. I have wrestled with that. Because I've had things that's come awfully near. from the hands of those that did not necessarily love God. And I've often wondered, well, is it because I don't have the faith like some people do? And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for me. I don't know how many times you've said that about a passage of Scripture, but I've said that about a lot of passages. I believe it, and it works. It just hasn't worked for me. But I believe we have to understand that when the Lord had revealed that and said that destruction will not come near you, it's this same pattern. Habakkuk, you're going to be in it. Habakkuk, you're going to be in the Babylonian captivity. It's going to come near you. Matter of fact, you're going to be taken into Babylonian captivity. You might die in the invasion of the city. But the evil itself will not come near you because you have faith in Jesus Christ, and your spirit, your soul, is going to be preserved. Your body may fall, but who you are in Jesus Christ will not be taken. That will not be taken. And I think, that's one of the things that can help us so much when we do suffer at the hands of wickedness in our world. Yeah, it hurts our wallet, it may hurt our family, it may hurt our, possessions, it may take our life, but it will not take my place in Jesus Christ. Paul was martyred. If anybody lived close to the Lord, it would have to be Paul. You know what I'm saying? So, but he lost his head at the hands of Nero. But Paul looked at leaving this world. I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to go home and be with the Lord, which is far better. He said in Philippians, remember? He said, but I know that I'll stay here. He knew that he would still be in this world until God got through with him. And then the hands of the wicked seemingly looked victorious. Nero cut his head off. There wasn't any victory at all. The Lord was through with him, ready to bring him home. He just didn't say how I'm going to bring him. We'd like to all know we're going to lay down and go to sleep and not wake up, and that'd be the easiest way, I guess, But we're just told that ever how you leave, I'm right there with you. Other questions, comments about this? It's a powerful passage. I mean, it shakes you up to think about this and think about it in light of that and the messages that he gives. Habakkuk, for 3 little chapters, will just get under your skin. I mean, it's powerful.
You have to think about Paul. Whatever happened to Paul, right? It didn't matter. It didn't change the news of the gospel being spread. So killing him, if they would have just taken him out back and only one person killed him, right? If Christ died by just being taken out back, not sacrificed, not everybody seeing it, it wouldn't have been an event. So it's really about the event of it all, right? It's that everybody can see, because if it was all done undercover, right? If we do it like we think about black helicopters and everything, taking people out, we would never know, right? So, and it goes back to Esther, right? Everything has to be done so it can be displayed to everybody to see what has happened.
And the Lord will do that. He will turn it back in such a way, and Esther is a great example of this. Haman goes to King Xerxes and says, listen, you got some people to live in your empire, and they don't obey your laws, and I'll give you a lot of money if you let me have them killed. All right, go ahead. Never ask him a question. But the Lord turned that thing around to where even the gallows that he built, everybody knew what the gallows was for and saw Haman hanging on his own gallows. The Lord has a way of being able to turn that thing right back. And even as bad as it looked in Esther, I mean, there was a decree that on the 13th day of Adar, or whatever month it was, y'all have the freedom to kill all the Jews you want to kill. I mean, this was government policy. I mean, it can't look much worse than that. But the Lord has a way of flipping that thing right around, and he did it through his providence. And we saw those providence when the king couldn't sleep at night, had the Chronicles read. You know, the Lord directed. He didn't, say anything to these folks, but he directed them to come to the section where the king realized he hadn't rewarded the guy who saved his life, which was Mordecai. And the Lord has a way of just publicly turning that. The death of Jesus Christ was publicly overturned in the resurrection. It's going to be publicly overturned in our life when we are resurrected. Whether it's pre, post, middle, whenever it is, it makes no difference. But when that happens, and it is going to happen, it's public, man. It's going to be a public overturning. An announcement of our victory. Good points.
Because these guys were in a relative world right now, they could be considered not known, right? But Nero or whoever, the king, Caesar, all the guys that were rulers at the time, or the president of the United States, everybody in the brother knows who they are. 1,000 years later, 2,000 years later, you don't know anything about this guys, but you know about Paul.
You know about Paul. Yeah.
How many millions of people on this earth now know the biblical individuals that spread the gospel, and they were nothing during that time.
Yeah. Even like Jesus said of the woman who came to him and washed his feet with her hair. Said, your faith, I believe I'm not mixing up the messages, but your faith and you will be known forever. Basically for this. This is what he told the slave. And to this day, preachers preach on that passage of Scripture. And she's remembered 2,000 years later. Now the Jews who harangued her, we don't even know who they are. But we know about her. We know about her. Now, chapter 3, and I know it's quarter after, and I won't be able to get all of it. But chapter 3 has been called a prayer of praise. Now, here's a question we can talk about a little bit, and we'll talk about it again next week. This chapter has been called a prayer of praise. Now, it seems a little odd, does it not? That he has just been told, your country, your city, your temple is going to be destroyed in judgment. And now, in response, he offers a prayer of praise. Doesn't that just kind of strike you a little odd? Everything you've got, put it into our context now. America, our country. Suppose one of these preachers that are on radio or television, a good one, not some of these name it, claim it, and whatever, and send me money and I'll claim it, type deals. Gets a message from the Lord. We're just supposing here. And the message is, America will fall and fall violently. And it is going to be the instrument that will set right the wrongs that have been done by this country, in this country, to this country. And we come to church the next Sunday and we're worshiping, praising God. Wouldn't that be just a little odd to you and me? So, how could he do this? I don't think Habakkuk was praising the destruction. But I think what he was praising in this third chapter, we'll go into this third chapter. He was praising that God is still in control. and is with his people. And the Lord told him back in chapter 1, he said, you're going to be amazed. When I give you the answer, you're going to be amazed. And he really was. So I'll give you that to think on for next week. And we'll talk about this. How can you, and let me leave you one other question. How can we be happy in heaven knowing that a loved one is lost in hell? Same thing. Think about that and we'll talk about it next week. Good discussion.